Hey you, quick one. This video briefly uses monsters of the horror variety, and will use visuals that are a bit gory due to the nature of Frankenstein. You know, you have to break a few eggs to make an omelette, and you will have to cut up a few bodies to make a fleshy golem. Horror and body horror is however not the focus of this video. You know yourself and your surroundings best, so please be mindful of that. Thanks. I've been thinking a lot about monsters lately. No, stop, wait, no. It wasn't exactly these kinds of monsters I was thinking about. It's more the kind of monsters that wish they weren't dead. You know, the kind of monsters that were perhaps never really monsters to begin with, until they were made to be. In my ruminations on monsters, I've been especially drawn to the tragedy of the perceived monster. In a lot of monsters in stories and media, I've talked a lot about creatures tragically turning monstrous and dangerous due to obsessions, falls from grace, or even just being the victims of terrible fates. Though we also have monsters who are malevolent without reason, other than needing the opposition of a monster in a story. You know, the real evil monsters. But there's something so profoundly tragic when these monsters are nothing more than victims to prejudice, when they never played any active part in being perceived as such.
Monster.
I can't stop thinking about these stories and their monsters. Maybe it is the contrast found within the innocence of something that looks or could be dangerous. Maybe it is the reflection of our own humanity in our treatment of those who are different. Or maybe it is the idea of who or what constitutes a monster. You know, what part makes the monster? And who decides what is a monster? Who sentences these creatures to tragedy? I think there's no better story to exemplify the tragic, misunderstood monster than that of Frankenstein. Spoiler warning, I'm going to talk about Frankenstein, both the book by Mary Shelley, but also by the time of writing this video, the recently released movie by Guillermo del Toro. Before we get too far, I would really suggest that you watch that movie. I think it's a masterpiece of cinematography, symbolism, and a fantastic way to retell the story of Frankenstein's monster. Though not as new and maybe not necessarily in need of major spoiler warnings, I am also going to talk about Team Ico's Shadow of the Colossus and the animated movie The Iron Giant by Brad Bird. The story of Frankenstein was written by the original goth girl Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley in 1816 when she was just 18 years old. It has since become a classic which has been remade in several renditions and is widely considered to be one of, if not the first, science fiction novel. The book follows the young scientist Victor Frankenstein, who's obsessed with creating life. In his pursuit, he creates the creature, a golem made of human parts he harvested from graves and charnel houses. Victor treats his scientific pursuit as something divine, viewing himself as the coming blessed creator.
But if we are to behave as immodestly as gods, we must, at the very least, deliver miracles.
Picking out the best parts for his creation, pearly white teeth, lustrous hair, and perfectly proportionate and strong parts to build his giant of 8 feet or just below 2.5 meters tall. Though he creates his creature with the utmost sense of perfection, as soon as he succeeds, as soon as he becomes the coveted creator bringing life to dead matter, he abhors his creation.
No, don't touch me! Don't ever touch me!
As soon as the creature is born, it is hated, rejected, and abandoned. Though the creature doesn't know it yet, he is born to be the rejected and isolated Adam to a contemptuous and selfish god. I think this is one of the most tragic parts of the story of Frankenstein, or rather Frankenstein's monster. He is condemned to be punished for a sin he did not commit. For it cannot be the sin of the creation to exist. It can only be the sin of the creator to create carelessly and without responsibility. Victor does not see this. Rather, he feels punished for his hubris. In his bitter cruelty, he calls his creation by many dehumanizing epithets. Wretch, devil, fiend, thing, demon, monster. He never has the decency to give it a name of its own. As Victor abandons his creation, it is left to its own devices. Like a newborn, he knows nothing of the senses he's given and the world he's living in. Though the creature is good-natured and friendly, he will soon find that humanity will not be so kind to him. At every point where the creature interacts with humans, he's attacked, chased, and rejected. Though the creature learns of humanity, history, and language, his monstrous form still betrays his eloquence. The creature remarks on its early memories of its existence in one of his encounters with Victor after he has gained language. I was besides endowed with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as man. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. Was I then a monster? A blot upon the earth, from which all men fled, and whom all men disowned. As he realizes that humanity will never accept him, the creature starts to believe himself to be what they call him. A monster.
Monster! Who's a monster?
It is then that the creature kills Victor's much younger brother, William, in an act of revenge against his neglectful creator. What Victor doesn't realize is that the act of creation doesn't stop at the moment of life. He shaped the creature into life, but by abandoning him, he creates the monster. In a last desperate attempt at receiving his creator's sympathy, having learned the story of Adam and Eve, the creature asks Victor, as his creator, to create him a companion, the Eve to his loathsome Adam, to alleviate his cursed loneliness.
I need you to make a companion for me. One like me.
A companion.
Victor again betrays the creature any form of compassion, and the creature vows to make his creator suffer for his transgressions. As a consequence, the creature kills Victor's wife on their wedding night and taunts Victor. Victor vows to chase the creature to the ends of the world. And it is at the ends of the world, near the North Pole, that Victor ultimately dies to exposure, never exacting his revenge. Though Victor has done nothing but curse the creature with a life of willful suffering, the creature laments the passing of his spiteful creator in the end, vowing to end his own misery and existence at a pyre at the end of the world. The story of Frankenstein has many connections to that of the Garden of Eden and the creation of Adam and the later desire for a companion. That of Prometheus, who stole the fire of Olympus to gift humans with knowledge, civilization, and morality, though he was subsequently punished for his transgressions, just as Victor feels punished for his hubris. And finally, that of John Milton's Satan of the poem Paradise Lost. As in the creature's rejection by his creator and humanity, he, like the fallen angel, rebels against his creator in revenge. Despite the creature turning to vengeful murder, the balance of sympathy falls to the tragedy of his cursed existence, and not that of his arrogant creator. In Guillermo del Toro's fantastical reimagination, he changes multiple parts of the story, enhancing the tragedy and sympathy for the creature. Of course, Guillermo del Toro is known for making the monstrous human, and telling the story of the monsters, and he has done so multiple times in his cabinet of creatures. So it comes as no surprise that the unjust depiction and fate of the creature is the clearest in his version of the story.
Who hurt you?
Though the creature also kills in the movie, he does so in self-defense, whereas in the book, his vengeance kills multiple innocents who were merely connected to Victor. Furthermore, Victor's abuse of his creation is way more pronounced early on in the movie. At first, he's enamored by his creation, but narcissistically so, as it is more pride and wonder in his own skills than that of the life he has created.
The achievement felt unnatural.
Contrary to the book, instead of fearing his creation, he starts to unreasonably despise it for its lack of intelligence. The creature only learns to say "Victor" before being stumped. Perhaps a reflection of Victor's own upbringing and education by a strict and abusive father. And so, Victor repeats the generational wrongs and begins to punish it, chaining him to the cellar, and wrongfully accuses him for being violent and dangerous, even attempts to kill him as he burns down the laboratory in which he was created. What Victor doesn't realize is that the only time the creature learned anything from him was when Victor taught the creature through compassion, not condemnation, when the creature didn't learn fast enough for Victor's expectations. Victor treats the creature as one of his experiments. Either it succeeds or it doesn't, rather than a child of which he is responsible and should care for, just as his own father. Functioning as a clear foil and contrast to Victor in Del Toro's movie, we find Elizabeth, Victor's sister-in-law-to-be and taboo love interest. Elizabeth views the creature with tender kindness, perhaps mirroring Victor's own loving mother, who died while Victor was still young. A thing of note is also that both Elizabeth and Victor's mother, Claire Frankenstein, is played by the same actress, Mia Goth, so she quite literally reflects Victor's mother in the movie. Early in the movie, Elizabeth is asked by Victor why she studies insects, and she remarks that her interest in science leans towards the smallest things, moving with nature, perhaps the rhythms of God. She always searched for something more pure, marvelous. I think to her, seeing the creature, despite its wonder, imposing size and strength, she sees him as the smallest thing. There is only one of him in the entirety of the world, and he is pure as a child and marvelous as a miracle. As a devout person, she is deeply fascinated by his miraculous existence. Perhaps she knows that just like her insects, the world can have a tendency to be crushing and corrupting to the pure. In many ways, Elizabeth symbolizes the parental loving figure that the creature didn't have in his actual creator. Frankenstein as a story depicts many themes, but one of the main ones are the relationship between the creator and the creation. Both Victor and the creature can be seen as reflections of Mary Shelley's own life. Just a year before writing Frankenstein, Shelley had prematurely given birth to her baby daughter, Clara, who had only survived 2 weeks before passing. Thus, Shelley was the creator of a fragile life born just to suffer. But Shelley was also the creation made to suffer in her own uneasy relationship with God. Having lost her mother not long after her own birth, and developing a strained relationship with her stepmother and father, Shelley felt immense loss and abandonment by those around her. If you want to read more into Shelley's life and influences, I would recommend the following write-up by user Peanut Butterfuck on the books subreddit, who brilliantly puts both book and movie into perspective. Please find the link in the description down below. Guillermo del Toro suffuses the movie with a lot of symbolism and references that both support Shelley's original work, but also adds new perspectives to the story. Victor's lab has a giant Gorgonion on the wall, a reference to Medusa, another despised and misunderstood monster victimized by her gods. The birth of the creature resembles that of a crucifixion, foreshadowing the creature who is to suffer the sins of mankind and its father. The use of colors to depict contrasts in nature, resurrection, life, and death. If you're interested in more of this, user The Sun Hunter makes a great analysis on the Guillermo del Toro subreddit. I put a link in the description. There is no question that Victor is the true monster of the story, both book and movie. And with Del Toro's changes in the movie, more and more people realize this during its runtime, as Victor's narcissism does nothing but destroy everything around him.
You are the monster.
Though brief glimpses of compassion are found throughout the movie. While in the ending of the book, Victor never shows any remorse, Del Toro's version ends with Victor and the creature's reconciliation, with forgiveness and acknowledgement of the father-son relationship, bringing peace to the dying Victor, and perhaps a bit of hope to the broken creature. The story is, however, still one of tragedy. No matter the reconciliation, humanity has proven that the creature will always be a monster to them, spare but a few tragic exceptions. The movie ends with a quote, "And thus the heart will break, yet brokenly live on." A quote by Lord Byron, who once in 1816 challenged a young woman to write a horror story. A story about a creature who was created just to suffer the terrible abandonment of its arrogant creator and the prejudice of the world. I know I'm extremely late to the party on this one, but I've recently played Shadow of the Colossus for the first time. And wow, this game is beautiful, and the atmosphere of the world, even though it is for the most part empty and quite esoteric, seems to contain so much story. Shadow of the Colossus originally came out on the PlayStation 2 in 2005, and was later remade in 2018, showing off its beautiful and impressive titans in high fidelity. I think there's a very primal part of my brain that just loves giant, monumental creatures. I, for example, love Godzilla movies, despite the sometimes contrived storylines, just because of the immensity of the monster and its special effects. So I kinda knew going in that I would love this game. And I really did. And even though I knew a lot about the game, I was somehow still surprised by how it felt to play. I love good adventure games, and nothing is more adventurously satisfying than journeying out into a foreign land on horseback with a sword and a quest for glory. The first time you meet a Colossus is amazing and awe-inspiring. Despite their massive forms, there almost seems to be a kind of elegance to them, a real creature of legend. It roams past you like a piece of moving architecture. A piece of moving architecture that stands in the way of saving the soul of the princess. I was excited to begin. I quickly gathered my wits and charged towards it. I climbed up onto its massive form. I held on tight as it fought back, trying to shake me off. It might have succeeded once or twice as I got my bearings on the controls of the game. As I found its first weak spot, I gathered up my strength and thrust my sword into the monster, tearing into its life force again and again. It didn't take long before the massive temple of a creature started faltering. This allowed me to climb to the top, where I prepared my final attack that would fell the Colossus to the ground. With an earth-shattering thud, I had bested a monster only heroes can dream of. What an experience! It was so... It was exciting. So why do I feel so guilty? the entity Dormin, who promised to bring back the princess if I defeated the 16 Colossi, did say that the price I pay may be heavy. Was this what it meant? I'm sure it was just this one. It was the first of the Colossi after all, so of course it would be easy, and perhaps therefore it felt wrong. Like, they need to fight back more, then surely it will feel better. More deserved. Multiple Colossi later, it didn't. Even when the Colossi through the first attack showed aggression from the start, even hunted me. It felt more like they were protecting themselves and their land, like a mother defending its young or an animal its home, than that they were trying to kill me out of any malevolence. Playing Wonder, I had selfishly trespassed on forbidden land and followed the orders of Dormin, a forbidden entity in a desperate attempt at bringing back the princess, who was sacrificed for having a cursed fate. Wonder puts his trust in an entity so evil that a whole land has seemingly been forbidden in order to keep it sealed. Wonder is not heroic. He is desperate from the grief of having lost the princess, and many despicable acts have been done in desperation. Each time I murdered a Colossus, I felt more and more guilty. Each time a Colossus hit the ground, dying from my ruthless attacks and the sad music started playing, I felt worse. Each time a new shadow seemed to stare judgingly at my unconscious body. Each time Wonder put on the weight of a new transgression. Why? Why am I killing these seemingly innocent beings that are serving as guardians of this forbidden land? Are their fates as cursed as that of the princess? Sacrifices for a cause beyond them. At the end, I so wished that I could rise the Colossi from the ground and let them inhabit this closed-off place again. You can see it in their vast elemental bodies and architecture. They are part of the land. Whether they were created by the civilization that once lived here or not, I think their forms tell a story, not of invading monsters or unwelcome entities, but rather of creatures made of the very same matter that supports the land and its ancient cities. Whether they are golems given life or mythical creatures given armor, I don't think it matters. Their lives are one with the Forbidden Land and has been for a very, very long time. To me, they might as well be sacred. Who are we to decide their tragic ends just because of who or what they are? Monsters to slay just to tick off another objective in a quest log? Is the life of a princess worth that of 16 Colossi? If they had just earned my wrath, or anyone's, it would have been much easier to accept their need to fall. But they have done nothing to deserve my ire, other than being pieces of a puzzle I'm solving. I know that functionally they are seals to hold the 16 pieces of Dormin's power. But when I filled Colossus after Colossus, finding their forms reduced to rubble afterwards, it didn't feel like I had just broken a seal. It felt like I had broken a living piece of the land. That I had killed a mythical creature that would never get to tend the land again. I've seen posts on how the Colossi are barely sentient, golems of rotten dirt, and how they are part of the evil Dormin, and that we should not feel bad for killing them. How they act, how they recoil with pain when their weak points are attacked. Those notions don't seem barely sentient to me.
In those eyes I saw pain, and what is pain if not evidence of intelligence?
They might be holding a part of an evil entity's power, but I don't believe that makes them part of that evil. Like a child who doesn't carry the sins of their ancestry, I don't believe these colossi carry the sin of their burden. Each time, the tendrils of darkness impaled Wonder. I got the sense that what I was trading was the lives of these majestic and impressive ancient creatures, for that of something that should stay far sealed away. This becomes very clear towards the end, as you fell the last Colossus, fully awakening Dorman, who consequently takes over Wonder's terribly corrupted body. In the end, Lord Eamon, who had pursued Wonder to this place to stop him, successfully reseals Dorman and somehow reverses the reincarnation ritual and finally destroys the bridge to this forbidden land. Dorman, having apparently held its end of the bargain, returns the soul of the princess Mono, who wakes up to find a horned baby where the Dorman-possessed Wonder had fallen, suggesting that perhaps Wonder was reincarnated with some fragment of Dorman's power. Perhaps it is destiny, that the very essence which were held within the Colossi now seems to be held within the reincarnated Wonder, who is now bound to grow up in the very land that the Colossi roamed, and perhaps bound, if he's ever able to leave, to be seen as a little more monstrous.
Are we the baddies?
But a question still lingers on my mind. Would Wonder have been able to do what he did if the Colossi weren't monsters? What if Dorman had been bound within 16 humans instead? Continuing with the giant theme, The Iron Giant from 1999 has to be one of my favorite animated movies from my childhood. And perhaps even more so now that I've gotten older. The theme of breaking free from the expectations of what you're supposed to be just hits a little different now. Unlike Frankenstein's creature, who was created by Victor just to prove that he could defy nature, the Iron Giant seems to be built for a different purpose. The giant seems to be created for the purpose of being a weapon, a word easily interchangeable with monster in this context. He's equipped with multiple lasers and defense systems, originally meant to be an autonomous alien planetary invasion force. However, by chance, a bump on the giant's head from its crash landing on Earth seems to have caused the planetary invasion protocol to fail, allowing the giant's curious, childlike and gentle nature to develop. It is through the fateful influence of the 9-year-old boy Hogarth that the giant slowly learns to distinguish between right and wrong, and life and death. Not much different than Frankenstein's creature and the old man. By becoming the giant's trusty friend, Hogarth inspires the giant's heroism by relating him to Superman, since they both crash-landed on Earth and are men of steel who wants to do the right thing. The story unfolds during the Cold War. Paranoia and fear-mongering is in the high seat, meaning that everything is a red flag and a danger to society, feeding into the uneasiness of the characters in the movie. This is no clearer than with the main antagonist, Kent Mansley, a corrupt government agent who remarks, "All I know is we didn't build it, and that is reason enough to assume the worst and blow it to Kingdom Come." The giant is unknown. It comes from space and is of alien origin, so it is easy to fear him. Though, much like Frankenstein's creature, who turned monstrous when humanity refused to see him as anything but a monster, the Iron Giant turns violent when met with violence. Though much like Frankenstein's creature, the giant has a compassionate and helpful personality. Perhaps unexpected from his exterior, with the giant being seemingly mechanical, it clearly shows that he is capable of understanding and showing emotion, as seen when he's faced with the concept of death, but also at the concept of himself being a weapon. Something he learns to despise and actively fight against. I am not a gun. These emotions are also what then makes the giant go full on guns blazing against the military once he believes that Hogarth has been killed by a military missile. If they want a weapon, they will get a weapon. However, when Hogarth regains consciousness, he's able to reach the giant and bring him back from beyond his war machine programming, just before he eradicates the military. Hogarth is the one person from which the giant can redefine himself as who or what he wants to be.
You are what you choose to be. You choose.
Hogarth believes this strongly and sees goodness within the giant, despite how dangerous he might have been created to be. Perhaps it is the purity of the child and their unprejudiced views of the world that allows Hogarth to see the giant for what he wants to be, rather than what he is expected to be. In the end, the giant proves himself to be the hero, fully breaking free from the bonds of his expected purpose and how people like Kent Mansley sees him, as a weapon or a monster. The giant fully proves his heroism by saving the town of Rockwell from the reckless abandon of the cowardly Mansley, who in his desperation launched a nuclear missile headed for the giant and the town. The giant chose to reject what it was created for, and instead become who he wanted to be, despite of those who deemed it impossible from his perceived nature.
You are who you choose to be.
And so the giant chose to be the hero who saved Rockwell that day. This idea of the misunderstood or non-malicious monster exists so many places, often as a catharsis for the outcasts or the moral teaching of don't judge a book by its cover. So many stories with varying degrees of perceived otherness that makes them monsters in the eyes and the expectations of the masses. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, King Kong, Nimona, hell, even Shrek. Though the presentation is a bit different for that last one, I suppose. So, who decides what constitutes a monster? We say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think often the monster is found there too. Perceiving a monster where there is none perhaps says more about the perceiver than the perceived. Like history is written by the victors, the narrative of the monster is often written by the beholders. And the weight of proof falls to the victim, the monster, to prove that they are not as perceived, no matter what their perceived sin might be. Whether they are born to suffer abandonment for being different, cursed to carry a burden that makes them a target, or fighting against a purpose they did not choose. I think that the ones we sometimes perceive as monsters are just different enough to fit that narrative. Difference doesn't make them monstrous. It makes them, well, them. Perceiving monsters where there are none allows us to perform horrible transgressions of humanity. Rather, when we show compassion despite our fears, we allow for humanity to cultivate. Perhaps, when we behold what we believe to be monsters, we should consider whether we're instead looking at something innocent through our own reflection. I think real monsters act with ill will. I think these monsters just want to not be perceived as such. do you have a favorite misunderstood monster in media? I would love to know in the comments down below. I bet there's a lot I don't know of or hadn't thought of in that context. I sincerely hope that you liked this video. If you did, please hit the like button. And hey, if you generally like this type of content, why not hit that subscribe button? And check out some of my other content. It's free. And it helps me out an awful lot, and hopefully in time will allow me to keep doing this full time. The support for my last video about obsessed monsters in the Dark Souls universe has been overwhelming and completely smashed my goal. Thank you so much for that. And all the great interactions and sweet comments just means the world to me. Thank you. It just makes me excited to bring you folks new stuff. I think my next goal would be to hit 1,000 subscribers. It is a bit of a long stretch, but I hope that I can hit it before the end of January next year. And now that we're nearing the holiday season, I hope you'll be able to play some of the games that have been waiting for you in your backlog. I know I'm looking forward to playing some of the Elden Ring Night Rain DLC and finishing Silksong, but I've also had my eye on Eternal Strands for a while. What games are you going to play? Thanks for joining me in my little mysterious corner of the internet. So long, until I find you again.